season, I think he's going to talk about what happens to very successful mayors after they leave. I just want to give him one plug. Have anybody been to the new pier? He accomplished a lot, but I've been all over the world, and I think that pier, with all the different pieces that are in it, I think it's one of the best public parks and public structures I've seen anywhere. So
good morning, everyone. A couple things first, and I'm looking forward to question and answer when we get to that part of my comments. But I know I'm going to be talking about leadership and life after politics, and clearly I'm not wearing a tie today, so that's one of the good things about life after politics, as you don't have to do that. I also just wanted to make a quick comment. I mentioned to PJ earlier when I first got here, looking at this beautiful building. This is a gorgeous facility, and if I had anything in St. Pete that I always was a little jealous of Tampa for, it was having buildings like this. We don't have as many of them in St. Petersburg, or buildings like Armature Works where we could do things like we're done in that building. And so I was always a little jealous of Tampa in that respect, for the beautiful old historic buildings that we all have here in Tampa. So I thought I'd talk first a little bit about leadership, and then I'll get into life after politics. And when I talk about leadership, it's kind of hard for me not to talk about what we were able to accomplish in St. Pete. And I've spoken and been asked to speak a number of times about what we were able to get done during my 8 years in St. Pete. And when they ask me to put a title on it, I always like to say, well, I'll call my conversation going from God's waiting room to God's craft beer tap room. Because that's kind of what happened to St. Pete. We certainly were known as God's waiting room, and my goal was to really kind of change that and to change the culture. And in fact, when I ran for the first time for mayor in 2013, one of the things that I said was St. Pete's the 5th largest city in the state of Florida, but we don't act like it. We act like we are a small town, like we're Mayberry. And I felt like we got to change that. And so, one of the things I think that leaders bring to a table is you have to have a vision and you have to know what you want to accomplish. And so I knew that there was a number of things that needed to change in St. Petersburg, from what I call traditional infrastructure, which are, buildings and sidewalks and roads and all of those things, libraries, the things that you are tangible, that you see. But we also felt like we needed to change what I call people infrastructure, which was the culture of the city, to behave differently, to do things differently, to act like we were the 5th largest city, but to really focus on creating a community that was diverse, that was welcoming, that was tolerant, where it didn't matter who you were. We wanted everybody to feel like they could be their original selves and be who they really truly were and feel comfortable doing that. And so that was one of the things that we really worked on. And I think that the mark in my mind of every successful leader is recognizing what your shortcomings are and making sure that you surround yourself with people who fill those gaps, and then let them do their job. And so, one of the things that was really important to me when I first got elected was to make sure that I had the right people around me, people that I trusted, people, as I always like to say, that were smarter than me, and weren't afraid to go out and challenge the status quo. If you're going to grow anything, whether it's a business, it's a nonprofit, it's a city or a governmental entity, you have to be willing to challenge the status quo and not be afraid of not always succeeding. If you were to go back and look at my first speech that I gave after getting elected at my inauguration, one of the things I said in that speech was, we're going to try new things and they might not always work. And that's okay. We're going to make mistakes along the way. But we're going to own them and we're going to learn from them. And as I always used to tell my staff, hopefully they're not too expensive. And that's okay. And so I think if you really want to lead your community or your business or your nonprofit or whatever your organization is, you have to be willing to think outside the box. You have to be willing to not just do what's easy, what's the status quo. Because if that's all you do, it's always going to be the same. It's never going to change. And so one of the things that I tried to do in leading my city was to challenge my employees. I used to love meeting with new employees for new employee orientation, which I was able to do until COVID. And one of the things I always said to every new employee was, look, I know that there are some things that you're doing right now or your departments are doing right now that work and they work well. I said, and that's great. But don't be afraid to try something new, because our goal is in representing our community and trying to make our community better for all of the residents shouldn't be to just want to continue doing what works and it's good. It should be wanting to be better. You should always be wanting to do things better than you're doing now. And that means taking chances and trying new things. I said, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. As long as we learn from it, we own it, which typically government doesn't like to do when they try something and it doesn't work. It's, oh, it was their fault. It wasn't mine. But you have to be willing to own when you try something and it doesn't work, and then learn from it, so that you don't make the same mistakes going forward. So one of the other things that we did right out of the box that was really important, I thought, if we're going to change the culture of the city, is to actually have a vision of who we want to become. Again, if you're going to be an effective leader, you have to know what you want to accomplish, because if you don't, you're just kind of like floating in the water and bobbing. And you're not moving forward, you're not moving backward, you're just kind of staying right where you are. Which is great, you're still alive, but what are you really accomplishing? And so we created a vision statement in St. Pete that we wanted to be a city of opportunity, and that was a really important part of the statement, where the sun shines on all who come to live, work, and play, that we would be an innovative, creative, and competitive community that honors its past as we pursue our future. And again, if you're going to lead people and get them to follow you, it's a message that you have to keep driving. If you're just saying it once and then you let it go, nobody's going to follow that. Nobody's going to know even what that vision is. And so every time that I spoke somewhere, I talked about that vision statement. And I always kind of broke it in half. Where the first part of it, I talked about how we're going to be a city of opportunity where the sun shines on all. And if you remember a couple minutes ago in my earlier conversations, I talked about trying to change St. Pete to become a more welcoming, diverse, tolerant community. A city that truly does provide everyone, no matter where they live, the color of their skin, their religion, who they love, everyone have the same opportunities. That was really important. And then the second part was important too, because you just heard me talking about thinking outside the box. Yeah, you gotta be innovative. You got to be creative if you're going to be competitive, because other cities all around the country, including Tampa, were doing and trying different things. And so if we weren't doing that in St. Pete, then it wasn't going to happen. And if the leader, the person who is in charge, isn't the one who's leading that way and talking about it constantly, then no one else is going to buy into it. And it's not going to happen. And so if you're going to be a leader, you've got to be effective at convincing those who are following you and working with you that the path you're trying to take them on is a path that potentially leads to greater success. And so that's why everywhere I went, I spoke about that vision statement, so that not only would the people that work with me, you notice I said not for me, but with me, not only did they feel that this is the direction they wanted to go, but if inside City Hall didn't feel that way, how are we going to get the rest of the community to buy into that vision and to follow that lead? That wasn't going to happen. And then that's the other part about leadership that I think is really, really critical. And as I said, with me, not for me, is yes, you want to hire really smart people and surround yourself with people who, in my mind, are smarter than me, but then you got to let them do their job. So many leaders micromanage, and I think it's a huge mistake. And I used to tell this to people all the time when I'd be talking about my staff. I'd say, you know, if I didn't trust my public works administrator, or my city development administrator, or my neighborhood affairs administrator, if I didn't trust them to do their job and do it well, then why did I put them in that position? So if you're going to be a leader and you put people in leadership positions, you damn well better trust them and then let them do their job. Because otherwise, why did you put them there? And I think it's a big mistake that some leaders make when they try and micromanage. You can't do it all, you can't know it all. And while the details and the fine details are important, when you're at the top of that word chart, if you're focused too much on the minor details instead of letting your staff do them, then you're probably not going to get a whole lot of things done. And that leads me to another point about leadership. Too many leaders want everyone to like them. I mean, we all want people to like us. That's just human nature. But if you're a leader and you're worried about whether people like you or not, and that's your whole focus, and that everything you do is based on, I want people to like me, I don't want anybody to hate me, I don't want anybody to say anything bad about me, then you're probably not doing anything. Because if you take a position, the minute you take a position, somebody's going to love it, and somebody's going to hate it. And that's just the way it is. And so if you're afraid of somebody hating it, then you're probably not taking a position. And if you're not taking a position, then it means nothing is changing. You're not really going to get anything done. You're just going to maintain the status quo. So if you want to be a really good leader, if you truly want to lead people, get as much information as you can on both sides of every issue, and then make a decision. It might not always be popular, but make a decision. What I always found in my 22 years of being in office, but most specifically in the last 8 years as mayor, that if I made a decision and I explained to people, this is why I made the decision, it's based on this. They might not always agree with me, but at least they respected me because I made a decision. Those leaders who never make decisions, they may think that people like them, people don't respect them. Because all of us, we just want our leaders to make a decision. To make a decision and then go down that path. And if you find it was the wrong decision, again, going back to what I've been saying, be willing to admit it and fix it. That's what you have to do if you're gonna truly be a leader. So those are some of the things I wanted to just share with you, you all about leadership. I'll talk a little bit because I really want to open it up for questions. Actually, my favorite part is questions and answers, and because I get to kind of let it rip, except when I don't. But I'll look forward to that. But the last thing I want to talk about is life after politics. And it's interesting because I've served at 3 different levels. I served at city council, I served in the state house, and I served as mayor. And what's been fascinating to me since I left that job as mayor and turned out is how many people have come up to me and said, are you going to run again? You should run again for mayor, or you should run for governor, you should run for something. But I've had a lot of people say, oh, you should run for mayor. I actually had somebody offer me to open my account. They said, I'll give you $100,000 to start your account right now. I said, well, that's lovely, thank you. But my last raise cost $1.5 million. Are you going to do that? And they said, oh, well, I can't do that. And I said, well, I'm not running. You know, it's been, on the one hand, the job of mayor, and I think if you ask any mayor, they're going to tell you, there is no better job in politics, especially when it's a strong mayor form governor, than the job of mayor. It's absolutely the best job. Local government in particular is the best place to be in politics because it's where you can have the greatest influence on your community. And it's also where, and I hope this doesn't change, and it's starting to change, and I hope we can stop it from changing, but the partisanship and the influence of money aren't the same on the local level as they are on the state or the federal level. And so I think that's why you get more accomplished. Plus, you can't run and hide from people here. When I was in the state rep, half the people had no idea who I was. When I'm mayor, or as Councilmember Carlson knows, when you're on city council, everybody knows who you are. And you see them everywhere you go. And they're not afraid to come up to you and tell you what they think. But it's the best job in politics, being on the local level. So I miss the people I worked with. I think I miss that probably more than anything. I loved my staff. I miss doing what I'm doing right now, speaking to people. To me, that was always fun. I always enjoyed that. And there's an energy that you get from an audience. And my wife always used to say to me, "Aren't you tired?" And I'm like, "No, I just fed off the crowd. It's awesome." So I miss that. I miss speaking to kids. I used to love going to schools, and we had an anti-bullying program, and trying to help kids not be the victim of bullying was really something I loved. And I missed having grand ideas and trying to bring them to fruition. I miss that. There's a lot of things I don't miss. I don't miss social media and the ugliness that it is. And unfortunately, I think politics has gotten so much worse. When I first started, there was no social media. In fact, when I first started, I had a pager back in '99 when I first ran. We didn't have cell phones back then. And if you did, it was on a carrying case that you held on your shoulder. And they were huge. It weighed like 100 pounds. So there are things I don't miss. There are definitely things I miss, but I have no plans to run for anything again. I am enjoying time with my family, time that I didn't necessarily always have. My wife and I have gotten to do more traveling since I left office, and that has been really nice. So there is life after politics. I still like to be involved to some degree. It's in some ways, a lot nicer being on the outside and just supporting candidates that you like and helping them get elected. I'm terribly worried about where we are as a country politically right now. And it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, we need to get back to a place where we actually can work together and have civil conversations. And both sides are guilty of violating that. And it's a shame. And I think our government suffers because of it at all levels. So that's been kind of hard watching it from the outside. And the last thing I'll say, and then we'll start with questions, is I think the hardest part about being in office, and everybody does it differently, this is something that I chose to do, is to not comment on what's happening in my community. If you read the Tampa Bay Times, I think I have been in 2.5 years quoted in the paper twice. Maybe, I think twice, and that's it. And I was even hesitant to speak those 2 times. I think, when you leave office, your job is really to not continue to try and act as if you're in office, which I think a lot of recovering politicians do. They have a hard time leaving and keeping their mouth shut. I didn't want to be one of those people. My feeling was I needed to be respectful to the people and to the mayor that's in there now, and get out of his way and let him do his job, or try and do his job to the best of his abilities. And so you won't see me quoted very often. I think those 2 are probably going to be it for a long time. And I don't think there's any reporters in here today, so that's good. So I won't be quoted again. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and speak to you all, to share a couple thoughts, and then we'll get into the questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. So thank you all so much.
If you were the mayor of Tampa, what would be the top 3 or 5 things you would do to make Tampa as fun and cool as it can be?
Well, let me start off by saying this. For the last 2.5 years, and Bill mentioned I'm with Shoemaker Advisors, and so for the last 2.5 years, I have spent 3 days a week here in Tampa, working downtown. Our office is in the Bank of America building in downtown Tampa. And so my view from my office was of the University of Tampa and the Riverwalk. So I have a really different appreciation than I used to have for Tampa. Truthfully, I didn't really know a whole lot about the city. What I did know, or what was apparent to me, is in some ways Tampa and St. Pete were kind of polar opposites from the standpoint of Tampa has a ton of office in downtown, but didn't have enough residential. St. Pete has a ton of residential in downtown, but not enough office. And I think both of those needs are starting to get addressed, more so here actually than in St. Pete, where residential is starting to get built in downtown Tampa, and I think that's really, really important and good for Tampa and for downtown in particular, because it will start bringing life back here. St. Pete needs office in downtown St. Pete badly. I was involved with the EDC, and we were trying to attract businesses to come to downtown St. Pete and to St. Pete in general. We had no place to put them, we still don't. So we need office. One of the things that makes St. Pete very different from Tampa, and this is a hard fix, but it's something that I think you have to be intentional about, is when you walk around downtown Tampa, the ground floors of most buildings are not activated. When you walk around downtown St. Pete, the ground floor of everything is commercial. It's restaurants, it's shops, it's galleries, it's all of those things, which gives you a reason to walk around downtown St. Pete. Tampa needs that. When all these buildings that are in downtown were built, they were built with big lobbies that had nothing in them. And so there's nothing that activates and grabs your attention as you walk around downtown Tampa. And I think that's one thing that needs to change. It's not going to be easy to change that, but I do think that's really important. The Riverwalk, I think, I give Mayor Buckhorn a ton of credit for finishing, the Riverwalk. It's been, I think he said 5 mayors or something that have been involved in that. I'm a big believer in a sense of place, and that's why the community is so important. I give this guy a lot of credit, and if you haven't read his book, his name is Peter Gaudiano. He's got a book called Emotional Infrastructure. The infrastructure of your community, and in particular the places and what they look like and feel like, is really, really important. They're gathering places, and there needs to be that. I think that's what the Riverwalk has created for Tampa. It's become this gathering place that it's like the Malecón in Havana. It's where the whole community all comes and gathers. You have to have places like that. And so I think for Tampa, having created that and finished it has been a big help in helping drive things. But there needs to be more of an emphasis. You've done really well with bringing in big companies, but it's the small businesses that give a city its culture and its feel. And so I think there's got to be a real strong focus on building up the small business community and supporting the small business community here in Tampa.
Could you name 3 concrete, non-cultural, tangible accomplishments, not including the pier, of which you are particularly proud?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I think that's, everyone expects me when they ask me, what are you most proud of in St. Pete? They expect me to say the pier. And obviously, I'm incredibly proud of the pier. Just the example of, and then I'll answer your question, but, the old pier, the inverted pyramid, and it always amazed me as we were going through the process, how many people are like, oh my God, you can't tear that building down, we love that building. Like, really? Where were you? Nobody went to the old pier because it sucked. I mean, it did. It was ugly, it was run down, it was kitschy, it was very touristy. And so the only time people went there is if somebody was visiting from out of town and said, well, let's go to the pier. And so you take them to the pier, but as a local, you don't want to go to the pier because it sucked. So that always amazed me. When we first opened it, in the first year, we budgeted $600,000 for parking revenue for the 2 lots. We did $2.2 million. And what that tells you is how many people actually went there and enjoyed it. So I'm very proud of it. But what I'm most proud of is we wanted to change the culture of the city, and we wanted to create opportunity and equity. And in particular, I remember when I was first running, and people would say to me, "Oh, we need to change the name of South St. Pete. There's this perception about it." And I said, "We don't need to change the name, we need to change the perception. And we need to change what people's trajectories are and their opportunities," going back again to that mission and vision statement. So what I'm really proud of, first and foremost, is we reduced poverty in our African American community to its lowest number in our city's history. We closed the income gap between our African American community and our white community from, I want to say, and I don't know the numbers as well as I used to, we were somewhere around 15 or 18% to like 7%, to its lowest number. So we were making a tangible difference. A lot of work to do still, believe me, but we had made a real impact. So that's number one. I'm really proud of it. And shortly after I got elected, I toured the police station. Oh my God, what a dump. When my deputy mayor and I went into that police station, we couldn't believe we were asking the men and women who keep us safe every day to work in a facility that was as bad as it was. Imagine an evidence room that has no ventilation. So you are storing urine samples and drugs, marijuana, and all this stuff that has a little bit of an odor to it, and there's no ventilation in the room at all. It was really bad. And so we rebuilt and built a brand new police station and training facility. Training facility was really important. And I always said, it serves two purposes. One, you want your officers well trained to keep them safe, but you want your officers well trained to keep your community safe, so that they weren't making mistakes and bad things weren't happening in your community. So that's the second thing that I'm really proud of. I think that the third thing, looking back, is, and I'll talk about the police department again. I'm the first mayor that I can think of that never had to really worry about his police department. Once I hired Tony Holloway. And if you remember that process, we had gone out and we had done a national search. We had narrowed it down to 10 candidates, 2 of whom were internal. We asked the 10 to give us 3-minute videos about themselves so that we could learn something about them that we couldn't get from reading their resume. And it could be anything they wanted to talk about. We shared those videos with the community, and we got feedback from the community. We narrowed it down to 4, one of whom was an internal candidate. We held a meet the candidates at the Coliseum, where the community could come in and speak with each of the candidates, and then give us their opinion about them. And then I interviewed them, and after I interviewed all 4 of them, I thought, I don't think any of them are right. What do I do now? Especially when the community expected me to hire the internal candidate, or at least some of the community. Well, we ended up going outside the final 4, which kind of threw everybody for a loop, when I hired Tony Holloway. And if you're a mayor and you have to hire a police chief, actually, if you're a mayor, hiring a police chief is the most important decision you make, period. Because if you get it wrong, everything goes bad. If you don't have a good police chief and you don't have a good police department, you've got trouble. And Holloway changed that department. He restored the respect that the community had for the police department, but equally important, he restored the respect that the police department had for the community. And it changed everything. And so, if you think about during the social justice movement, what was happening in cities all over the country, buildings being looted and burned, tear gas, rubber bullets, all of those things, it never happened in St. Pete. We never had any of that. Now, we had protesters, and that was fine. but we never had the violence that came in a lot of other cities. And the reason we didn't have it is because of all the hard work that the chief had done and the men and women of that police department had done to rebuild the relationship with the community and trust and respect. So I'm really proud of that too. I think those are the three things that, now, if you ask me tomorrow, my answer might be different, except for number one, it would still always be number one. But
I had the pleasure of working with you and your team for about 6 years. It was fabulous. I bet everybody here is thinking I'm going to ask about bicycle friendliness, but I am not. One of the things I marveled at during the time that I got to spend in downtown St. Pete was you and the amazing Jessica Eilerman. I learned about the way that you fostered new startup businesses, small new startup businesses, and shortened the time that it took for them to open their doors and bring their products and services to the market. And later, the way that you protected Central Ave so that it could remain cool and fun as it is now. But my question to you is, tell us about the economics of that, because when I see the outdoor dining, I see the vibrancy, I see the fun, I see the art. I think that's a lot of great money coming to the city for new and different things. So can you talk to that, please?
yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question, and I love working with you, by the way. We did amazing things when it came to bike lanes and pedestrian walkways and things of that sort. But I mentioned small businesses before, and I really, really believe that cities that are vibrant and that thrive have thriving small businesses in their communities. It is your small businesses that give your city its feel, its character, its culture. And so, to me, there were several things that we wanted to accomplish. We wanted to make sure that we continue to recognize and lift up our small businesses and not be an impediment. Jessica Eilerman was my small business liaison. It was a position we created because we wanted to have someone who kind of was that ombudsman for our small businesses. So if they were having issues with the city, if the city was doing anything that was making it more difficult for that business to be successful, somebody needed to be their advocate within City Hall. And that was what Jessica's job was, and she was really good at it. When she left after I turned out, and it was a big loss, I think, for the city, because that position was really important to be that advocate for the small business community. So we used to do, I did something called a small business tour. And I used to visit small businesses all over the city. We tried to do them as unannounced as we could, because we didn't want them to do anything special for me coming in. We wanted to see them in their, I hate to say normal habitat, but as they normally are doing business. And I always went in and I asked one question. Tell me what the city is doing that is making it hard for you to be successful. Let me know, because I don't know what we're doing to make it hard for you to be successful. I can't fix it. And so that was one of the things I used to love doing, is going into small businesses to find out what's their day-to-day life like, and am I doing anything as a leader of our city that's making it hard for them to be successful? And if I am, we got to fix that, because we need those small businesses to be successful. So that was something that was really important, and I think made a big difference for us. I've been to a number of other cities, places like Charleston, Savannah. You go there, and Charleston in particular, I'll use as an example. King Street was kind of like their most famous street, kind of the equivalent of our Central Avenue in St. Pete. And what I saw happening in Charleston was those small businesses were being pushed out, the locals, and chains were coming in. Now, chains aren't bad, and we sometimes stigmatize them. And there are places where it's great to have chains. You want those. But there are places where you don't want them. And a street like Central Avenue, or in my mind, King Street, those are places where you should not want to have chains. That's where you want that feel of your city to remain. And so we knew that the challenges were going to continue for the small businesses along Central as they became more popular, as that area became more popular. there's always the tendency of the landlords to say, hey, I could raise the rent. And that forces that business out, and then they're looking for somewhere else. And we may lose them. And so I challenged my staff to try and come up with a solution that would allow us to continue to grow, but not lose our character and our feel. And that, it kind of goes back to what I talked about earlier again, about as you walk down the street, what does it look like? What's it feel like? The activation of it. And so we did our conservation, I'm trying to remember the full name of it now, Conservation Corridors program. Basically, we measured every single business along Central Avenue, from 2nd all the way to 31st Street. And the idea was we're going to put regulations in place where a landlord that has, let's say, 2 small businesses and a medium-sized business on a block can't force all of them out and create one large space that a chain will come into. They had to maintain, unless there was a variance granted, they had to maintain the same breakdown, 2 smalls and 1 medium. Now, if the chain wanted to come in, they would have to come in knowing that they weren't going to, their space was going to be limited, and the exterior design also was part of the regulations. And so a lot of chains come in and they have requirements as far as what their building must look like and their space and the design and the exterior. Well, they might not be able to do what they were used to doing, and if they wanted to be in that smaller space, they were going to have to follow our rules so that that feel as you walk down that street would still feel the same way. So that was some of what we did. Yeah, and then the money that it generated. So, I served on the TDC for Pinellas County for a number of years, and one of the things that I used to talk to them about all the time was we should be marketing the fact that we are a city of small businesses and arts and culture, because people want that. They want to come to a community and they want to visit somewhere where they get to see restaurants and shops and galleries that they don't see in other cities. That's why they want to come. That's the fun part about traveling. I don't know about y'all, but when I go somewhere, I want to go to restaurants and stores that I can't find anywhere else, that I only find in that city. And so a lot of the people who come to St. Pete, that's why they're coming. They're coming because they will find stores and restaurants and galleries and that they won't find it in any other city anywhere else in the country. And it's been a huge economic driver for our city.
Rick, thank you for your plug for downtown Tampa, but you've got the Palladium, the Vinoy, the Coliseum, which you've mentioned. Those are great spaces over there. Question for you. What can we do to eliminate or at least mute the rivalry between St. Pete and Tampa? The most recent, I think, expression of this was one of your predecessors wanting to change the name of the team from Tampa Bay to St. Petersburg Rays.
Yeah. So regionalism was always something that was really important to me. It was nice when I came into office. One of the things that helped as it related to regionalism was the fact that Mayor Buckhorn was the mayor here in Tampa at the time. He and I had known each other for more than 20 years, and we both kind of were of the mindset that if we continue to fight like we are, our region is going to suffer, because other regions around the country aren't doing that, and that's who we're competing with, and it puts us at a competitive disadvantage. So we started talking about regionalism everywhere, and how if we act as a region, if we work together, we could compete with anyone, anywhere in the country. Now, granted, there are things that Tampa excels in that St. Pete doesn't, and things that St. Pete excel in that Tampa doesn't. But what we recognized is that if we're working together and a business comes to this region, whether they locate in St. Pete or Tampa, both communities will benefit. So a new business comes to Tampa, Bill brings a new business here. That's great for St. Pete. Because what I know is that those people who are working in that business that Bill brought here, they're going to come visit St. Pete and spend money. Some of them may live in St. Pete. That's good for my community. If they come to St. Pete, same thing's going to happen. They're going to come here to Tampa. They're going to spend money in Tampa. Some of them may live in Tampa. That's good for Tampa. So regionalism is really important if you're going to compete. We made great progress. I think one of the things that set us back in the progress that we had made, and I've been vocal about this and I'll still say it, was when the Chamber and the EDC changed their name. Tampa Bay, the name Tampa Bay, and I don't know about you guys, but it always drives me nuts when somebody says, I live in Tampa Bay. Well, unless you got a houseboat, you don't live in Tampa Bay. It's a body of water. Come on. But Tampa Bay, that term, has always represented this region. It hasn't represented Tampa. It hasn't represented St. Pete or Clearwater, or even Sarasota or Lakeland. It's represented the entire region. And so when you use the term Tampa Bay, you should only be using the term Tampa Bay when you're talking about the region. The Bucks, the Rays, the Lightning, they are a regional asset. They're all of us. We all root for them. Tampa Bay makes sense to call them Tampa Bay because they may play in St. Pete or they may play in Tampa, but for all of us in the region, they're our team. So I get that. The Chamber and the EDC here in Tampa represent Tampa. For them to change their name to Tampa Bay, I felt was a setback. I can tell you that everyone in St. Pete that's in business, that's involved in the Chamber or in politics, was really pissed off about it. And it said to us that it isn't a partnership. We're going to dominate here in Tampa because we think we're better. That was what it said. Now that may not have been the intention, but that was the message that was communicated to us across the Bay, is that we're going to represent you because you can't do it yourself. And that was a huge mistake, and it was a huge setback, and it still is an impediment, and I still believe that the Chamber and the EDC haven't done enough to work on repairing that relationship and rebuilding that trust. We all, if all of you who are parents, you may have had this conversation with your kids. I know I have with my kids. I said, trust is a funny thing. It's hard to build, it's easy to lose. We had worked really hard at building trust. When that name change came, that trust got lost, and I don't think it's been rebuilt yet. And that's a shame because the region suffers when there isn't trust between our communities.
You spoke about the importance of the influence of local government on people's lives, and I certainly believe in that. But how do you think local government should be responding to the ever-increasing preemption by the legislature in local government's control over their communities?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Good job. First off, I'll repeat a line I used one time when I was on the floor of the House in the middle of a debate, because I think it applies perfectly here. I said, if hypocrisy was an Olympic event, you guys would win the gold medal. So, I love when Tallahassee says to Washington, stop telling us what to do, we know our state better than you. But yet they have no problem telling local government what to do because they think they know local government better than we do. Which, quite frankly, is, I won't say the word I was going to use, but it's mashugano, I'll say that. I'm waiting, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, I'm waiting for some legislator to file a bill in Tallahassee that eliminates local government. I think it's only a matter of time before somebody files something like that. Look, there are times when a statewide policy makes sense, but there's a whole lot of times when it doesn't, because St. Pete and Tampa are different than Alachua, the city of Alachua, or Micanopy. We're just different. And things that work there don't necessarily work here, and things that work here don't necessarily work there. and shouldn't be in place. And so it drives me nuts how many, and you know, we have a job to do and we just wanted to do our job. We know our residents. And when our residents are asking for something, overwhelmingly, we wanted to be able to give it to them. And for the state to come in and say you can't, when this is what the residents want, I think it's just hypocrisy. And it just blows my mind that less government. Oh, we need less government, except when we don't. Except when we don't like it and we want to tell you what to do. Then we need more government. Very frustrating, and it's gotten so much worse. I mean, I used to joke when I was in the legislature that as a House, remember the House, you only got 6 bills that you could file every session. Senate was unlimited. But I used to joke they should give us 3 freebies, because every session I saw a license plate bill, I saw something that was going to create a crime or make something that was a misdemeanor or a felony, and then I saw a preemption bill filed every session. It's like, well, you should just get them to us for free then, because we're going to see them every session anyway. But, yeah. Very frustrating.
Our lease has run out, and we're here. This has been very insightful. You can add this to your question. Thank you. The conversation, please take it to the portico or the portico café across the hall. Thank you.
And I made it without a question about the raise. I can't believe it.